So we're with Cystic Fibrosis Ireland, and we're talking to Emma Wallace, who's a Member Services and Advocacy Senior Coordinator. You're welcome to the show, Emma.
Thank you so much.
And also with Louise Patterson, who talks about adult access to medication. Am I right, first of all? And second of all, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, so, adult and also child's access.
Oh, very good, very good. So Emma, I might start with you. You might tell us a bit about cystic fibrosis, what it is and how it affects the sufferer.
Yeah, thanks for having us, first of all.
You're very welcome.
So, thank you. Cystic fibrosis is essentially, it's a multi-organ disease and primarily affects the lungs and the digestive system. So it's a genetic disease and essentially is linked to protein production within the body. So that's a little bit about, I suppose, what it is, where it comes from. Us as an organisation then, we've been in operation back since 1963. So we have a long history within Ireland in supporting those with cystic fibrosis.
So tell us a bit about the symptoms of cystic fibrosis. If I had it, what symptoms would I show?
It's typically picked up in the heel prick test, and many parents would be aware of that test that's carried out on a young baby in the very, very early days. From the heel prick test then, I suppose the team is alerted to the fact that the young person has cystic fibrosis, and then they're connected with a consultant and a team to support that young person with regards to treatment and ongoing treatment throughout their young life, then into later life.
And what about statistics? Has there been any statistics for the amount of sufferers?
Ireland does have one of the highest rates of carriers of cystic fibrosis. And I suppose the disease in itself has evolved a lot throughout the years. And I think that's something that's really important to mention with the introduction of, I suppose, new therapies and new techniques of dealing with the disease. The life expectancy for those with cystic fibrosis has increased. And there's a lot of positive research going on in the background with regards to treatment for those with cystic fibrosis.
Is there any specific reason why Ireland has such a high rate of cystic fibrosis?
Louise, I might let you take that one.
Go on. Are you, first of all, are you actually a sufferer?
No, I'm a parent of a child with cystic fibrosis. Yeah. I don't actually know exactly why it is that it's a high rate here in Ireland, but there's a particular gene that is very prevalent in Ireland, and that probably plays a role because there are obviously people worldwide have cystic fibrosis, but the level of severity of their disease impacts on their length of life, and the level of medication and health, their treatments that they get also impacts the length of their life. So I imagine it's something to do with that particular gene allows people to live a little bit longer, and they're benefiting from medications as well.
So when you talk about medications, have there been advances in the care for people with CF?
Absolutely. Sorry, Emma, there's been huge advances throughout the last few years, and I suppose and into the future as well. I suppose, and that is with the introduction of modulator therapy. I suppose essentially, statistically, modulators are available for 90% of those with cystic fibrosis, but there are those that fall into the 10% bracket whose mutation would be, slightly more complicated, and maybe the treatment isn't necessarily appropriate for them, or they're not able to tolerate it. And I suppose that's one of the campaigns that we're working really hard on at the moment, is getting access to different forms of modulators for young people and adults who fall within that 10% bracket. And Louise has been doing lots of work in the background with regards to our working group and our campaign that's currently underway in relation to that.
You're on, Louise.
Yeah.
Tell us all about that.
From the 10% perspective, what we know is while there are some that won't benefit from the medication, there are some that have never been tested. So because of that, there is potential that they could benefit, and the research is beginning to show that potentially up to 50% of that 10% could still benefit from the medication to some degree. But the difficulty is with cystic fibrosis, there's so many different genetic variants that not all of them can be tested in a lab, because we're talking about tiny amounts of people. So for my son, for example, there's about 50 people worldwide that have his gene that don't have access to modulators. So they've never been tested.
So let's stay on you and talk about medication. In the past, I know my wife's cousin, she was one of the first to get the wonder drug, so they called it, way back. It was extremely expensive, and very, very few people got it. Is that still the way?
So thankfully, while as every generation of that modulator has come out, they have expanded the amount of people that can access it. So the medication you're talking about, I remember it well. It's maybe 10 or 11 years ago now. And there was a small cohort of people that it worked for. And the drug company has really worked really hard in making sure that it works for more people and more people. But, and yes, it is very expensive still, because it's a very specialized drug for a small group of people in the world. But it is, it's getting better with time. But I suppose what we're really focusing on is that there's still a small group of people that we know now won't access clinical trials. So they won't get that benefit to try it the way your wife's relative did. And so we're trying to push for a new way of trying to access the medication so that we get individual trials for patients rather than go with the larger clinical trial model.
Are there other medications on the market now? And have there been advances in the medication provision?
So each of those modulators has certainly got better. So that's a big part. There's a new modulator coming, and it's been released in America just in the last few weeks, which is showing, it's obviously showing a lot of promise. And again, it's capturing an even larger group of people. There are other medications in the pipeline, because cystic fibrosis, as an organization worldwide, we really campaign really hard for our patients. And they have put a lot of funding into research to try and advance medication. So there's certainly more things coming down the line that will have huge advances. But I suppose all that is very slow. And really the people with CF that are waiting, we have to keep them going and keep them strong until they can access those medications that might change their lives.
And tell me, is medication the only treatment?
Yeah, at the moment it really would be. There's a lot. So people with cystic fibrosis, there's a heavy burden on taking a lot of medication on a daily basis. For example, my son and most people with cystic fibrosis, not all, would have pancreatic insufficiency, which means that their pancreas doesn't work, and they need to take medication every single time that they eat because their body doesn't digest their food properly.
That's a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of hard work. And then there's also people with cystic fibrosis also have to do physio when they're well. For my son, for example, he has to do it 3 times a day, which is inhaled medications, certain masks, physical exercise for an hour a day. And then when someone is unwell, that increases and increases because, they're trying really hard to keep their lungs healthy.
Right. If I go back to you, Emma, let's talk about the organization. When was that founded and why?
So basically it was set up, I suppose, by 2 parents that got together and really recognised the need of support for those with cystic fibrosis. I mean, a key element of the organisation is community. As I mentioned there's just on the verge of 1,400 people currently in Ireland with cystic fibrosis. So it's really, really important from that perspective that the community is fostered and supports are put in place to best meet the needs of these individuals. And from that perspective, Cystic Fibrosis Ireland was formed, it has evolved, and it's growing in line with the needs of our members and really positioning ourselves that we're there to support our members on a daily basis based on whatever needs they may have.
And let's talk about the services you provide. What are they?
Absolutely. So we have a range of services, and I suppose the first service that I always like to talk to is our support desk. So our support desk is there and it's ran by our patient advocates. It's open from 9 to 5 every day, and that service is really there to support any member with regards to listening, signposting into different services that they might need to avail of. We also have grants available for our members as well. So our fertility grant would be a grant that was very popular last year. And that's really where we're supporting couples to come together, because for males that carry cystic fibrosis, typically they are infertile. So it's a very difficult path to parenthood.
That's a shocking
grant
stat.
there. Within males. So that grant it's a fantastic support for individuals who are looking to become parents, because IVF in itself is a very expensive procedure. So that might be one of the grants. Louise mentioned there exercise. Exercise is really, really important for those with cystic fibrosis as well. And we also have an exercise grant that essentially supports our members to access different forms of exercise that would support them in their treatment program on a day-to-day basis. So I suppose that's just a little bit of information around some of the services that we offer. There's been a lot of work there in the last few months with regards to working with some new programs, and one of those would be our parent support program. And that's a fantastic offering that we have. We have a support group that meets the first Wednesday of every month. And that, again, is fostering that sense of community, allowing parents to come together in a shared space. We meet online just to discuss shared experience and that kind of, I suppose, the value that you get from that peer-to-peer support perspective.
I presume that's a massive tool for parents.
Yes, it absolutely is. Being able to come together and just take that time, down tools, grab the cup of tea, jump on board and kind of just talk with other parents with regards to what's working for them. That shared knowledge is so powerful, but also as well, just knowing that you're not alone, that there's other parents going through similar and have similar feelings as well. And that shared experience is so powerful.
And Louise, did you go through that, and how did you find it?
Well, unfortunately, it didn't exist back in the day when my son was born, because he's nearly 12. Yeah, but it is a fantastic. It's relatively new, and I think it's a fantastic. I'm actually volunteering for it myself as well to connect with parents, because I think it's such an important thing. Something else that's really important to know about cystic fibrosis is that patients can't be around each other. So the only way for support has to be online, which is in some ways a benefit of COVID, that we've all figured out how to make these things happen online. So this has kind of been birthed from that, as well as this support group is something where parents can find a way to connect without cross-infection or worrying about getting each other sick.
Oh, Emma, I'm going to come back to you then about the organisation. I presume research into the condition is big.
Yeah, research is really, really important as well. We are part of the European, I suppose from the European perspective as well, there's a lot of research that goes on in the background. And from an organisation perspective, you know, we're very involved on that European level as well with regards to understanding what different research is coming up, what's involved, what's happening. And I suppose investment in research is really, really important. So from a fundraising perspective, we've got a very robust fundraising team who works so hard here in the background on a daily basis, organising funds that are invested into the likes of these grants, the services that we run on a daily basis, but also investing in research to understanding what's available and to be there and I suppose understand from that perspective, so then we can offer it out to our own parents and families based here in Ireland.
Are there many drugs involved in the treatment, and are they very expensive?
Yeah, there, as Louise mentioned there's a lot of medications involved on a daily basis for anybody with cystic fibrosis, and yes, the cost, the burden of cost is very significant. And I suppose through the HSE, a lot of these medications are provided under the LTI scheme, so that is a benefit in itself. But I suppose cystic fibrosis does bring with it additional costs, and that's something to be very aware of as well on a daily basis. Those with cystic fibrosis are not necessarily in a position where they can work full time. There's some challenges there, even with regards to education and mainstream education, being in a position or a place where the 9 to 5 and I suppose the routine and the tiredness that maybe comes along with it on a daily basis can be a challenge as well. Particularly if somebody becomes unwell and they're having to take a break from their employment or education, that can pose challenges for some of our members.
And then your fundraising team, what kind of fundraising activities do they get up to?
So we have lots of ways that our members are involved, and I think that's one thing to say. Our members are fantastic. The efforts, the heart that they put into each and every fundraising activity that we have is phenomenal. There's no other word for it. We have scheduled walks throughout the year, and we have our Malin to Mizzen cycle where we literally cycle from Malin to Mizzen. We have a walk coming up now as well. Actually, that's an annual walk where we go abroad and do a scheduled walk with our walking team. We also have our community fundraising department as well then. So I suppose they will support any member of the public who come to us essentially with regards to looking to host a fundraising activity. We have the mini marathon, Dublin Marathon, not to mention our 65 Roses Day, which is coming up in April as well, which is a great opportunity with regards to generating awareness as well as fundraising on the day as well.
And you also have shops. Don't forget to mention them.
I'm not actually sure if we have
shops.
many shops. No, I don't believe we do. I do know there's a lot of organisations that do have walk-in shops, but not necessarily cystic fibrosis. Yeah.
Okay. So going back to Louise then. What's life like as a mother of a person with cystic fibrosis?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's pretty normal because it's all we know. But at the same time, Aaron has a lot on his shoulders when he has to do medications, exercise, and it's constantly on his mind or on our minds in terms of hygiene is a big element as well with cystic fibrosis, because if a patient breathes in mold spores or certain types of bacteria that could be, totally harmless to all of us, but can be really serious to them, that it can have a really big impact, and daily life can go to suddenly having to be in hospital on a regular basis. So while life looks pretty normal, there's a lot of hard work that doesn't get seen, that goes on in the background.
Do you remember the first diagnosis?
Yeah, so Aaron was picked up prior to the heel prick because he was very sick when he was born, which can happen for some patients with cystic fibrosis. They're born with something called meconium ileus, which essentially means that their digestive system is completely blocked up. And so Aaron needed to have surgery within a few days of being born because he couldn't intake any food. So that was a quick indicator that it was either cystic fibrosis or another condition that looks a little bit similar. So we had been given a bit of a heads up at that point that we could be looking at that. And then obviously it was confirmed through the heel prick and through the genetic testing.
And what about things that we take for granted, like holidays and all that type of stuff? They must be something that you don't do.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Good.
But certainly, we do. But certainly there's a lot of considerations that go into that. For example, like going swimming can be we have to make sure the pool is hygienic enough. So that can be hard when you go abroad because you just don't know what kind of level of hygiene. So we have to be very cautious and considered about where we might go on holidays, what level of hygiene a particular place might kind of put into the effort of taking care of something. Also, not knowing if we're going to have a hospital stay. So booking a holiday a year in advance, that's very unusual. Like we wouldn't typically do. Now, other families might, but we don't typically do that. We usually end up going on last minute break.
Right. That's a hell of a lot of hard work to do for a last minute holiday.
Yeah.
We're coming right to the end of our time. Is there anything else you'd like to put out there before we close?
Yeah, so part of the message that we're trying to get out today, alongside all the work that CF Ireland puts in for the patients and the all the members, is that at the moment we're trying to campaign for access to modulators, as I mentioned briefly earlier. So we're in this difficult position where that small group of people who could still benefit from the medication is not being given access because of really red tape. The EMA have standards that they require clinical trials to be done. We personally have lab-based evidence that this medication could work for Aaron, but the EMA don't accept lab-based evidence at the moment. They only accept clinical trials. And as I mentioned, there's such a tiny amount of people with Aaron's gene in particular, and that goes for, there's a few more parents that are in this group with me that we're trying to fight for access, that we don't, there's no way that a clinical trial can be got for each of our, you know, there's 4 or 5 patients in the group at the moment. Not one patient has the same gene type. So even in this tiny group, there's already 5 different groups of gene types that are in that. And to get clinical trials is impossible for all those people. So what we're really appealing to the EMA to do is to open up access through our clinical teams, where we can get a trial individually, like has been done in the likes of France, where all patients are given the medication for 3 months or a limited period, and they're monitored. And if they are seen to benefit from it, or if their disease progression slows down, they're allowed to stay on it. And that's what we're really pushing for.
And vice versa, if they fall back or anything like that, they stop it.
Yeah, so if it's shown that it's not benefiting them, then there's no reason for them to stay on a medication unnecessarily. So that would be the approach that they've taken in France. And we would hope that that might be an approach that can be expanded throughout Europe.
Very good. Now, Emma, same question. Anything else you'd like to put out there before we close?
Just to really reiterate what Louise mentioned there, there's a fantastic working group in operation there of parents that have come together to really get and really enforce that message and that need. And really it is about offering the option of hope for these parents, for these families, with regards to having access to these to this medication, which essentially would be consultant-led. And I think that really is a key message today, as well as thanking everybody who donates, who is part of our membership and helps us on a day-to-day basis to provide the services that we do to our members and to our patients, as well as the hospital teams as well.
And my last question, if somebody with a new diagnosis wants to get in touch, how do they?
Absolutely. If somebody does have a new diagnosis, essentially they will be linked in with their team at their hospital. But also our telephone number to get through to us directly is Dublin. So it's 014962433. And they can give a call in. Like I said, we're open every day from 9 to 5 and speak to one of the member services team, and we'll be delighted to work with them with regards to identifying supports available for them.
And will you just give that number one more time, just so if anyone that's watching, they can take it down?
Absolutely. So it's a Dublin number, 014962433.
Emma, Louise, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.